very good to be with you today, and it's especially good to be with our colleagues, Secretary Barcina, Secretary Gwen Morostro, and my good friends as well and colleagues, Secretary Armando, and of course, Trade Representative Tai. I'm also looking forward, I must say, to Alicia, to seeing you next week in Mexico to pursue our security dialogue. Before I get into what we've been doing today, let me just take a moment to express deep condolences on the passing of Senator Dianne Feinstein. I had the privilege of serving in the Senate when Senator Feinstein was there. Had an opportunity to travel with her, including to the Middle East. She was a trailblazer in American politics, an influential voice for strengthening U.S. national security and making it more inclusive, including through her leadership on the intelligence community. And she was a strong advocate, as everyone here knows, for closer ties with Mexico, just over the border from the state that she loved and served so admirably for decades. We're meeting at a moment of unprecedented momentum for the relationship between the United States and Mexico. If you look at last year, our bilateral trade hit a record $860 billion. Earlier this year, Mexico became the United States' largest trading partner. Our two countries have a shared vision for our economic future, one that's defined by fair competition, openness, transparency, measuring prosperity not only by how much countries grow, but by how many people share in that growth. As we discussed this morning, by creating the right incentives and business environments and harnessing our two nations' respective strengths, we have a tremendous opportunity to make North America the most competitive, the most productive, the most dynamic region in the world. That's what this dialogue is fundamentally about. We're continuing to strengthen, to expand and diversify supply chains in emerging industries like electric vehicles and semiconductors. Today, in fact, we're launching a joint semiconductor action plan to accelerate our integration, to scale our efforts, to attract new investment. Under President Biden's leadership, we're building regional clean energy technologies and semiconductor supply chains through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act that will drive our economies through this century. Mexico's overhauled one-stop shop website is providing prospective investors the tax and regulatory information that they need to take advantage of this landmark legislation. And we're taking steps to improve and strengthen even more our border coordination, like piloting a model port to streamline inspections and finding ways to reduce wait times, making it easier for people and goods to cross legally while strengthening our capacity to deal with fentanyl and other illegal narcotics. We're also addressing the root causes of irregular migration by boosting economic opportunity. In southern Mexico, in northern Central America, our development agencies, USAID and AMEXID, are supporting 50,000 students, farmers, and others with jobs, with training, with access to markets and capital. When people can make a living, when they have confidence in their economic security, when they can put food on the table for their kids, when they can build a future at home, that's exactly what they'll choose to do. And they're less likely to undertake the very dangerous and hazardous journey north. We're collaborating to ensure that workers on both sides of the border are prepared to succeed in the industries of the future. That includes partnerships like the one between Arizona State University and the National Technological Institute of Mexico, offering Mexican students an 8-week English for the semiconductor industry course. This work on workforce development, on skills, is essential to our economic partnership and, again, to strengthening our joint competitiveness. When then Vice President Biden launched this dialogue a decade ago, he said that the relationship between our countries and people, and I quote, was grounded in a common border, a common culture, common values, common dreams, common potential. That's why we launched this dialogue in 2021, or really relaunched it. And by further deepening our economic integration, I'm confident that we'll continue to realize the extraordinary common potential that President Biden and then Vice President Biden pointed to. With that, Alicia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Buenas tardes.
Good
¿Me
afternoon.
escuchan? Sí. Bueno, Muy
All right.
buenas tardes.
Very good
Buenas
afternoon to you.
tardes a todas, a todos, estimados
Everyone.
miembros de la prensa.
Dear
Gracias
members
por
of the press
acompañarnos
corps,
en
thank
esta
you for being
tercera
with us
edición
for
del
this
Diálogo
third
Económico de Alto Nivel México-Estados Unidos, que es
high-level
uno de los
economic dialogue
mecanismos que hemos establecido
Mexico-United
entre
States.
ambos
It's one of the
países
mechanisms
para
created between
volver
both
más
countries
eficiente nuestro
to
diálogo y sobre
become more
todo
efficient
para
in our
tener
dialogue, and
canales de
especially
comunicación en
to have
diferentes
channels
frentes. Tenemos
of
otros,
communication
por
in
supuesto,
different areas.
sin duda el
Obviously, we have
Tratado de Libre
others,
Comercio,
of course,
el
the
TEMEC, y
USMCA,
por supuesto el diálogo que tendremos la
and the
próxima
dialogue
semana
that we will
sobre
have
seguridad,
next week
migración,
on security,
drogas sintéticas,
migration,
armas, que lo
synthetic
llevaremos
drugs,
a cabo
weapons.
la próxima
This will
semana
be
en
held
México.
next
Pero
week
creo que
in
hoy
Mexico.
hemos
I
logrado
think today, though,
entender
we
cuáles son
have been able
los
to
avances que hemos
understand
logrado
the
para
progress that we
fortalecer
have made
nuestros
in
lazos
strengthening
económicos
our economic
y
ties
sociales, yo diría, y
and social
comerciales
ties and
entre los dos
trade
países.
ties, I
Y
would
de
say,
verdad
between
quiero
both countries.
extenderle un
I would
agradecimiento muy
truly
especial
like
al
to
secretario
thank you,
Anthony
especially
Blinken, a Gina Raimondo,
Secretary
a
Blinken,
la
Gina
embajadora
Raimondo,
Tai, que ha sido
Ambassador
un honor para
Tai.
mí porque
It
es
has
mi
been
primera
an honor
reunión
for me because this is my
como
first
secretaria de
meeting
Relaciones
as
Exteriores y muy
Secretary
bien
of Foreign
acompañada de la secretaria Raquel
Affairs, and I'm
Buenrostro, que
very
es
well, I'm in
la que
very good
lleva,
company with
digamos,
Secretary
toda la
Buenrostro,
coordinación
who
de este
manages
diálogo
all
económico de alto
coordination of
nivel.
this
Pero
high-level
solo
economic
voy a
dialogue.
mencionar algunos
I'm
temas.
only going to
Por
mention a
supuesto
few
que
issues.
nos
Of
hemos
course,
convertido en el primer
we
socio
have become
comercial de
the
Estados
first
Unidos y eso
trading
implica
partner of the
muchas
United
cosas.
States, and that
Implica
means many
responsabilidades,
things. It means that
compromisos
there are
y también
responsibilities,
yo diría
commitments, and I
una
would
visión
also say
conjunta de
that there
crear
is a
una de las
shared
zonas más
vision to
potentes
create
desde
one
la
of the most
perspectiva
powerful
económica y social.
areas,
Y por
economically
lo
and
tanto,
socially speaking.
en esta sesión,
Therefore,
pues hemos
during this
hablado de
meeting,
cómo
we
reconstruir
discussed how we
juntos,
can
cómo
build
promover el
back
desarrollo
together,
económico
how
y
to
social,
promote
sobre
social
todo en
and
nuestro
economic
caso,
development,
en el
especially
sur
in
de
our
México,
case,
en
in
Centroamérica,
southern
en
Mexico,
Sudamérica, porque
Central America,
sabemos que
South
estamos
America, because we
recibiendo
know
una
that
gran
we are
cantidad de
receiving a
personas
large
hacia
number
nuestras
of
fronteras,
people
pero también cómo
at our
aseguramos
borders, but we
herramientas para
also
la
need to
prosperidad
find
futura
tools
y cómo
for future
invertimos en nuestra
prosperity,
gente.
and we need to
Creo que uno de
invest
los
in our
temas más
people. I think one of the
interesantes que
most
se trató
interesting
hoy
topics that
es
we discussed today
precisamente las
was
cadenas de suministro
specifically
de nuestra
supply
región y sobre
chains
todo
in our region, and
semiconductores y
especially
conductores, con una
semiconductors and
estrategia muy
conductors,
clara,
with a
y
very
es que esta
clear
región se convierte
strategy
en la región más
for this
potente
region to
para
become the most
producir
powerful
conductores y
region in
semiconductores del
production
mundo,
of
y por lo
semiconductors and
tanto que se
conductors in the
reorienten las
world,
inversiones
and
hacia esta
therefore
región, como
investments
seguramente
should
lo
be
abordará
redirected
nuestra
towards these
secretaria.
areas, as our
Pero uno
secretary
de
will
los temas que
discuss.
hemos abordado aquí
But
también
one issue that we
es el
discussed here
tema
as well
de ¿cómo podemos
is
fortalecer la
how to
infraestructura fronteriza?
strengthen our
Y
border
ese sí es un
infrastructure,
tema
and
enorme.
that
¿Por
is a
qué?
huge
Porque
issue.
nosotros en
Why?
el comercio
Because
terrestre, imagínense
when it comes
ustedes,
to
en el
land
comercio entre Estados Unidos y
trade
México,
between
tenemos vías de
the U.S. and
comunicación
Mexico, we have
realmente que son muy
lines of
importantes para el
communication that are
tránsito de
extremely
mercancías, pero
important
de
for the
personas y de
transportation of
muchos otros
merchandise
temas
and
que voy a
people and
abordar a
many other issues
continuación.
that I am going
Contamos
to
con
discuss
60 puertos de
briefly.
entrada
We
en
have
nuestra
60
frontera
ports of
común,
entry on our shared
23
border,
cruces terrestres y
23
37
land
pluviales.
crossings and
Presentamos
37 river
avances en
crossings.
esta reunión
We have made
de las
progress
obras
at
de
this meeting. We
infraestructura
have
de
shown
ambos lados
progress and
para
talked
ver
about the
cómo
infrastructure
podemos,
on both
en cierta
sides
medida,
to discuss how we
equiparar nuestras
can
infraestructuras para lograr
bring
un
our
mejor
infrastructure
resultado.
up to
México está
speed so that
listo
we have
para
better
concluir la
outcomes.
obra de OTAI 2,
Mexico
por
is
ejemplo,
ready to
en
complete
2024,
OTAI
lo
2, for
mismo
example, in
Mexicali 1,
2024,
Caléxico, San
Mexicali 1,
Luis, Río Colorado,
Calexico,
Agua
Rio
Prieta y San
Colorado,
Jerónimo,
Agua Prieta,
que son
and San
lugares muy
Jerónimo.
importantes
These are
porque
areas that are
en
very
realidad
important
es por donde
because
están
it is
pasando la mayor
truly
parte de
where
los bienes
most
y las
of the
mercancías entre
goods
nuestros dos
and
países y personas,
merchandise
por
and people
supuesto.
are
La
coming
Agencia
in
Nacional de
and out
Aduanas,
of both
por
of our
ejemplo,
countries. Our National
está en
Customs
cierta
Agency,
medida
for example,
apoyando
is
1.7
supporting
millones de operaciones
1.7
mensuales
million
entre
monthly
exportaciones e
operations between
importaciones y
imports
son
and
más de 20
exports,
millones de
and there are over
operaciones
20
anuales.
million
Se le está dando apoyo
operations
a
per year,
800 a
supporting
84,000 importadores y
84,000 importers
817 agentes
and
aduanales. Y se
817
trata,
border
fíjense de lo que se trata,
customs
la
agents.
modernización
And the
es
issue
lograr
is
que el
modernization.
100%
We
de
need to make
nuestra
sure that
carga que
100%
cruza la
of
frontera
our
sea
cargo that crosses the
automatizada.
border is
Y ahí estamos
automated.
colaborando
And that is where we
estrechamente
are working
para
very
lograr estos
closely
cruces
in
más
order
fáciles. Porque
to
fíjense que si
ease
nosotros
crossings,
disminuimos,
because
de
if we
acuerdo al
are
Atlantic
able
Council,
to,
si
according to the
reducimos
Atlantic
10
Council,
minutos
if we
el
shave
tiempo de
10
cruce,
minutes off
se
border
generan
crossing
3,000
times, that
empleos
would
adicionales
bring in
en 6
3,000
estados fronterizos
additional
de
jobs
México,
on
Baja
6 border
California,
states,
Sonora,
Baja
Chihuahua,
California, Sonora,
Nuevo León
Chihuahua,
y Tamaulipas,
Coahuila, Nuevo
y
León, and
facilita
Tamaulipas.
el
And this
ingreso
would
de
also
25
facilitate
millones de
the
dólares en
entrance
mercancías
of $25
hacia Estados
million
Unidos. Entonces,
of merchandise
creo
to the
que
United
este
States.
programa de
I think that
modernización
this
de la frontera
modernization
es
program on the
importantísimo.
border is
Y ahí
extremely
estamos
important.
invirtiendo en
And
México.
there
Este
we are
año nos han
investing in
aprobado ya
Mexico
un
this year. We have a
presupuesto
budget
de 15
approved
mil millones de
of
pesos,
15 million pesos,
880 millones de dólares,
$880 million,
que va a permitir, entre otras
which
cosas,
will allow to do,
aumentar
among
nuestra
other things,
capacidad de detección
increase our
de
capacity
armas
to
y
detect
drogas
weapons
sintéticas.
and synthetic
Sabemos
drugs.
que este es
We
un tema
know
muy,
that this
yo
is,
diría, muy
I would
profundo
say, a very
y que en realidad está
deep-seated
resonando
issue
muy fuerte
and
en la
that it
comunidad de
is
Estados Unidos.
resonating
Y yo
very
quiero
much in the
asegurarle,
U.S.
secretario
community,
Blinken,
and I'd like
y
to assure you,
por su
Secretary
conducto al
Blinken,
presidente Biden,
and through you,
que
President
tenemos
Biden,
instrucciones del
that we have
presidente Andrés Manuel
instructions from
López Obrador
President
de hacer
López
todo
Obrador
lo que
to
esté
do
en nuestras manos
everything in
para
our
poder
power
controlar
to
el tráfico de drogas sintéticas
the
y
flow
la cadena de
of
suministro desde
illegal
su origen,
drugs and
¿verdad? Los
the supply
precursores, la
chain from
entrada
the
a
beginning,
México, el
precursors,
paso
entry into
fronterizo,
Mexico,
en
border
fin,
crossings.
queremos realmente
We
decirles y
want
confirmarles
to
nuestra
say
disposición y
and
compromiso
reaffirm
para
our
que este
decisiveness
tránsito,
and
digamos, para
commitment so that
controlarlo,
to
drogas
controlling
sintéticas, que duda cabe,
synthetic drugs,
armas, que es lo que para
weapons,
nosotros también es
which
muy
is
importante,
a very
y
important
esa
issue to us as
infraestructura
well.
creo que
And I
nos va a
think that
generar grandes
infrastructure
beneficios, porque en el fondo lo
create
que
great
queremos es
benefits
crear una frontera
for
segura,
us, because what we
una
want in the end
frontera
is a
que nos dé
safe, a
las
secure border,
garantías a la
a
gente
border
de que
that
estamos haciendo bien las
provides
cosas.
assurances to
Y
people
como
that we
usted
are
dijo, y con
doing
eso
things well,
voy a cerrar
and
mi
with
intervención,
what you
porque la
said, and I'm
parte
going
más
to close with
fuerte
this,
y
because this
económica
is
la tiene
because as far
la
as the
secretaria
economy, the
Buenrostro,
most important
es
part
el
will be
tema
discussed
que
by
la
Secretary
migración.
Buenrostro.
La migración es un tema que
Migration
tiene profundas
is
raíces
an issue
económicas y
with
sociales. Y
strong
por eso
social and economic
nosotros
roots,
hemos
and that is
acordado
why
irnos
we
a las
have
causas
agreed to
estructurales de la
look at the
migración.
structural
Pero
causes of
también
migration, but
hemos
also
visto que
we
el
have
problema de
seen
nuestras
that
fronteras
the
de México y
problem
Estados
on
Unidos
our
no
border,
nace ahí.
the
Es decir,
U.S.-Mexico
en
border, it
verdad,
doesn't begin
las
there.
personas están
Really,
llegando más bien
people
desde
are
el sur.
coming from the
Entonces
south.
tenemos que
So
tener una
we
mirada
need to have
hemisférica,
a
regional,
hemispheric,
para incluir
regional
desde
perspective
Ecuador,
to
Colombia,
include
Panamá,
Ecuador, Colombia,
Venezuela,
Panama,
Haití,
Venezuela,
Honduras,
Haiti,
Guatemala,
Honduras,
Costa
Guatemala,
Rica,
Costa
y por
Rica.
eso nuestro presidente
And
está
that is
tomando un
why
gran
our
liderazgo en esta
president is
materia.
assuming great
Y la
leadership in
próxima,
this
y
regard.
aquí, secretario
And
Blinken, lo
here,
hemos conversado,
Secretary Blinken, we have
realmente
discussed this.
creo que
I think
ayer, además
that
de esta reunión
yesterday, in addition to
ustedes,
this meeting here with
tuvimos
you,
la ocasión de
we
reunirnos
were
con
able
el secretario
to meet with
Mayorkas, con
Secretary
la asesora
Mayorkas,
presidencial Liz
with
Sherwood,
Presidential Advisor Liz
precisamente, y con
Sherwood,
algunos de los
and
representantes de
with
estos
a few,
países,
we met with a
para
few
hablar
representatives from
precisamente
these
de
countries
acciones
to talk
conjuntas
specifically
para
about joint
controlar
actions
este
we can
flujo
take to
migratorio,
control
para ofrecer opciones de
these migratory
desarrollo y
flows,
para evaluar
offer
vías
development
regulares y seguras de
opportunities, and
movilidad.
approve
Esto es
safe
urgente,
and
porque
legal
la verdad es que
pathways.
sí hemos
This
tenido
is
una crisis
essential
que
because we
también nos
have
afectó en
had
los
a
cruces
crisis that
fronterizos
affected
del
us
comercio,
at
y por lo
our
tanto tenemos que
trade
estar muy
crossings
preparados para
as
ello.
well. So we need to
Y
be very
creo
well
que
prepared
acá
for
en
this.
Washington
I
para mí
think
ha
that
sido un
here in
agrado estar,
Washington it has
porque he
been
tenido
such
la
a pleasure for
oportunidad
me
de
to be here
reunirme
because
también
I've
con
been able to
representantes
meet
del
with
Senado
representatives
y de la
from
Cámara
your
de Representantes, del
Senate
House
and
of
House of
Representatives,
Representatives
para hablar de la relación
to talk
bilateral
about our
y para
bilateral
de verdad
relationship
tener una visión
and
conjunta
to
del
have a
legislativo,
shared
del
vision
ejecutivo,
from the
en donde
executive, the
podamos hablar
legislative
de
branches,
temas de
where we
seguridad,
can
de
talk
migración,
about
de
security,
desarrollo, de
migration,
comercio, de
development,
tráfico de armas, de
trade,
drogas
weapons
sintéticos, de
trafficking,
fentanilo,
the
y
trafficking of
desde luego
synthetic drugs,
decirles que
fentanyl,
ambos
and
gobiernos
to
estamos
tell you
trabajando
that both
fuertemente
governments
para
are
ir a las
working
causas
very
de origen,
hard to
tanto
attack
USAID
root
como
causes.
AMEXID están
AMEXID and
uniendo esfuerzos para
USAID are
invertir. Nosotros estamos
joining
invirtiendo
together
en
to
Guatemala,
invest. We're
Honduras,
investing
El
in Guatemala,
Salvador,
Honduras, El
150
Salvador,
millones de dólares,
$150 million,
generando beneficio para
this is
54,000
benefiting
familias. Eso ya es un
54,000
avance.
families. This
Estas
is
54,000
progress.
familias
These
lo van a
54,000
pensar
families
2 o 3 veces
will think
antes de
about
moverse
it
de su
several
lugar de
times
origen.
before they
Muchas
make the
gracias,
decision
secretario
to leave.
Blinken.
Thank you
Estoy
very much,
segura
Secretary
que
Blinken.
estas
I
reuniones
am
que
sure
tenemos
that
entre
these
Estados
meetings
Unidos y
that we
México
are
se
holding between the
convierten en
U.S. and
reuniones de
Mexico
amigos, de
are
socios,
meetings of
y así
friends,
podemos crear una
partners,
comunidad
and
norteamericana.
therefore
Muchas
we will
gracias.
create and build an American community. Thank you very much.
Secretary Buenrostro.
¿Se escucha? Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Pues sin duda decir que este diálogo de alto
Undoubtedly,
nivel
this
fue un
high
diálogo muy
level
productivo,
dialogue was
muy
very
cordial
fruitful,
y con
very cordial,
muchas expectativas hacia el futuro.
and we have lots
En
of
este momento
expectations vis-a-vis the
hablábamos
future.
de que es el mejor momento de la
We were
relación
saying that this is the
económica
best
entre
time
México y
in
Estados Unidos.
the
Los
economic
niveles
relationship
comerciales
between
de
both
intercambio
countries.
son los más altos en la
Our
historia.
our
Somos ya el primer
trade
socio
has reached
comercial
the
de Estados
highest
Unidos.
levels in our
La
history.
inversión
We
ha
are the
crecido.
main trade
Tenemos
partner
en
of the
México
US in Mexico.
cifras
We
históricas
have
de inversión
greater
extranjera
investment.
directa, donde la
Also,
mayor parte de la inversión
foreign direct
extranjera es
investment,
de
and
nuestros
most
socios
of these
de Estados Unidos,
investments
y también
come
donde
from
se
the
está dando
US.
una mayor integración de las
And we are
cadenas de
also
suministro.
seeing greater
Esto sin
integration of
duda es
supply
un
chains.
fortalecimiento y una integración integración
this means
de los gobiernos,
strengthening and
pero también ha
integration
sido
of
con
these
mucho
governments,
esfuerzo del
but this
sector
has been
privado.
done also
El
with
día de
efforts on
ayer
the
hubo
side of the
reuniones
private
también con
sector.
el sector privado
yesterday,
tanto de
we
Estados
also
Unidos
met
como
with the
de
private
México.
sector
Es la primera vez que
stakeholders
se
both from
coinciden
Mexico
en
and the
fechas un
US.
diálogo de
It is
alto
the
nivel
first
económico
time
entre
a
gobiernos como un diálogo
high-level
entre el
economic
sector privado.
dialogue
Esto nos lleva
of
a
this
una
nature with
integración,
also
a
the
una
private
hermandad
sector
que nos va a llevar
takes
seguramente
place.
a
This
muy
is
buenos
going
resultados.
to provide very
Estamos
positive
trabajando
results for
juntos en
of us.
convertir en
We are
América
working
del
together
Norte en
to
un lugar de
turn
integración
North
económica
America into
más importante
the
para
most
la relocalización e
important
integración de
place
las cadenas de
for
suministro
the
de
integration
varios
of
sectores
supply
estratégicos
chains
y además para
pertaining
no
to
tener tanta
several
dependencia
strategic
y garantizar
sectors,
la
so
no
as
irrupción de las
to
cadenas de
guarantee
suministro.
that
Entre ellos se
supply
encuentran
chains
la
are not
electromovilidad, la
disrupted.
parte de
Amongst
energías
these we
limpias,
have
dispositivos
what has
médicos
to do
y
with
por supuesto uno de
electric
los más
vehicles,
importantes que
medical
ocupó la reunión
supplies,
del
and
día de
one of the
hoy
main
fue el tema
elements,
de
the issue of
semiconductores.
semiconductors.
Particularmente en el tema de semiconductores, México y
Regarding
Estados Unidos estamos
semiconductors,
trabajando
Mexico
cómo
and the
complementarnos
US,
en
we are
esa
working to see
tecnología
how we can
para
complement
poder
each
tener
other
la cadena
on this
más
technology
fuerte
to have the
en materia de
strongest
semiconductores
supply chain
y optimizar todos los mercados
on
de tecnologías de la información y
taking advantage
comunicaciones.
of different
Para México es una
ICT
gran
markets.
oportunidad también
For
porque
Mexico,
para
this is
nosotros nos
a
permite contar
significant
con mayores
opportunity.
empleos y
It
mejor
allows
remunerados.
us to
Trabajo
have
especializado
better and
que va de la mano
better
con el gran
paying
talento
jobs.
mexicano que existe.
These,
México tiene una
as you
cantidad
know,
de egresados ingenieros
Mexico
superior
has
a la de Alemania, por ejemplo.
higher
Tenemos el
number
doble de
of
ingenieros egresados por año
graduates in
a Brasil,
engineering than
pero además
Germany
nuestros
and
ingenieros son de
Brazil.
los mejores
And our
capacitados.
engineers are
Y esto
amongst
se
the
está
best trained in the
fortaleciendo aún
world.
más
We are
con el
strengthening
trabajo
this
conjunto
even
con las
more,
universidades de Estados
working
Unidos, pero
jointly
también
with
al
you,
interior
American
del país para darles y la
universities
industria para formalizar un
and
currículum más
the
apropiado
industry,
para
so
los
as
nuevos
to
sectores
create a
industriales que se
bigger
están
link to the new
desarrollando.
technological areas.
Sin duda, el día de hoy estamos
Undoubtedly,
celebrando una visión
today,
conjunta
we
entre el
are
presidente Andrés
celebrating
Manuel López
the
Obrador
shared
y el presidente
vision of
Biden,
Presidents
donde lo más
López
importante
Obrador and
siempre es la
Biden.
gente.
The
Y
most
todo este
important
desarrollo
thing is the
económico y
people.
bienestar va a ser
All of this
siempre
well-being
manteniendo
and
a nuestro
economic
pueblo en el
development
centro
will
del
take
bienestar.
place, keeping
Es un
our
desarrollo
peoples
económico por el
at
bienestar
the
de nuestros
center
pueblos.
of what we're doing.
Secretary Raimondo.
Thank you. Thank you and good afternoon. Special thank you to Secretary Blinken for hosting us for an excellent and important session. It's an honor to be here, and a big warm welcome to Secretaries Buenrostro and Barcena for joining us here in the United States. I also want to add my note of sadness and gratitude to Senator Feinstein. Not only was she a strong advocate for immigrants, but was a pioneer and somebody that many of us women in politics and public service looked up to for many years. She paved the way for the rest of us, and it is, in fact, a very, very great loss for our country. As has been said, the U.S. and Mexico have an incredibly important, significant, and growing trade relationships, one of the largest in the world. And the relationship, though, isn't just limited to trade, as important and as large as that is. The relationship includes strong historical, familial, and cultural ties. And I think we have to remember that as we celebrate 200 years of bilateral relationships, of our bilateral relationship, yes, let's lean into trade, and yes, let's expand that trade, but let's continue to work together as neighbors and as longstanding partners. 2 years ago, our governments reconvened the high-level economic dialogue, and it has been a very positive and productive engagement in that time. Our goal in this dialogue is to make it easier for our countries to trade, to invest, and to innovate. And by building regional prosperity, as has been said, we will help to develop diverse, high-skilled workforces and spur the next wave of economic growth, and do it in a way that is inclusive so that all of the peoples of both of our countries have an opportunity to participate in the economic prosperity which we together will create. As you have heard, today was an opportunity to both review the progress that we have made over the past couple of years, but even more important, to talk about where we go from here, the progress we will make together as we go forward. And one of the areas on which I am very focused is the area of semiconductor. We at the Commerce Department are hard at work implementing the CHIPS and Science Act, which of course will supercharge the U.S. semiconductor industry, creating hundreds of thousands of high-paying semiconductor jobs here in the United States. But there is a huge opportunity for Mexico to also participate in the economic benefits of the supply chain. And so we are looking to use the HLED to figure out ways of better coordinating so that we realize the significant economic opportunities for Mexican workers and Mexican businesses, including small and medium-sized Mexican businesses. It just creates an opportunity for Mexico to be part of our efforts and incorporated into the efforts of building more resilient supply chains through partnering with our allies and with our neighbor. So in the weeks and months ahead, we will continue our engagement with the private sector, with labor, civil society, academic institutions, all of whom are essential to our success. And I think I can speak for all of us that we have high hopes for the high-level economic dialogue and the role that it will play in achieving this vision. And together we will build a secure and prosperous North America that stands ready to tackle the challenges of the 21st century. So thank you, and thank you for hosting us.
Thank you, Gina. Kathleen?
Thank you. Tanya, is this on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't paying attention. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being here with us. As my colleagues noted, our relationship with Mexico is special and important. We share more than just a border. The sheer volume of our bilateral trade in goods and services really does speak for itself. More than $2 billion per day. Mexico is now our top trading partner, and we have an important trade agreement, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, that has further deepened our ties. I also wanted to take a moment, along with my colleagues, to pay homage to the great Senator Dianne Feinstein, who was an enormous supporter and champion of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. And I also want to note that this has been a hard week for all of us as another great champion of our efforts in renewing our trade ties and bringing a new approach to trade. Tom Conway, the president of the United Steelworkers Union, passed away earlier this week. So it's been a hard week, but a good week to remind ourselves of our champions and to carry on their legacies. Our people have a shared history and culture going back centuries. Last year, we celebrated 200 years of bilateral relations, and it is this human connection that distinguishes and reinforces our relationship. And this is why President Biden relaunched this dialogue in 2021, to work together so that our people enjoy greater prosperity and a greater quality of life. Trade plays such an important role in our pursuit of this vision. Investing in our people and our workers is a top priority for our administration and a key pillar of our worker-centered trade policy. This new approach is especially important as both of our countries continue to navigate an ever-changing global economy marked by a worsening climate crisis, geopolitical tensions that are rising, food insecurity, and growing inequality. And together with Mexico, we are working to mitigate the risk of future supply chain disruptions. For example, we're standing up a mechanism under the USMCA to ensure cooperation during trade flow disruptions that happen during crises and emergencies. And we are leveraging our trade relationship to lift up all workers and to drive a race to the top in North America, in line with our vision under Pillar 4 of this dialogue, investing in our people. Separately, through the USMCA, USTR is working closely with the government of Mexico to ensure that the rights of workers to freedom of association and collective bargaining are being upheld. Just over the past year, we've secured wins for workers at several different facilities in Mexico: new collective bargaining agreements, major salary increases, safer working conditions. This is having a real impact on working people's lives on both sides of the border. Our agreement is working in so many other ways too. We're collaborating on workforce development to equip our people, especially our women, our youth, and underserved communities, to boost their success in a new era. We're working together on important environmental issues, and we're empowering small businesses and entrepreneurs to fully benefit from the USMCA. Just last week, we joined our partners in Mexico City for the second USMCA Small Business Dialogue. At the same time, there is a lot more we know that we must and can do together. I want to close on the importance of stakeholder engagement. The success of our work under the dialogue will depend on who gets a seat at the table, because policies and initiatives should not be carried out in a vacuum or reflect the views of only a select group. So I'm going to conclude my remarks where I started them, with a focus on our people. We must hear directly from them, especially those from historically underserved and underrepresented communities in Mexico and in the United States. Not only must they have a seat at the table, their voices must help shape our work going forward. And I'll quote President Biden from the United Nations earlier this month, when he said that we must live up to the promises we have made to ourselves, to each other, and to the most vulnerable, and to all those who will inherit the world we create. I look forward to our continued work with all of my colleagues here and with our stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The first question today goes to James Longman with ABC News.
Thank you very much. The State Department has already said, Secretary Blinken, that the shutdown threatens the United States' reputation around the world. My question is, would you accept a deal which did not include aid for Ukraine? And a second question, the United States provides hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to Uganda, and this is a country that has just passed one of the harshest anti-gay laws in the world. President Biden has already condemned it. You've put sanctions on various individuals on their ability to travel, but I'm wondering what material response the administration is planning and when we can expect that.
Great. Thanks very much. Let me take the second part first. We have, as you know, consistently expressed very deep concerns about the Anti-Homosexuality Act that was signed into law earlier this year. It infringes very clearly on the human rights of Ugandan citizens, of journalists, of its citizens. It jeopardizes progress in the fight against HIV/AIDS. Uganda has been, for so many years, an excellent partner in that very fight. Jeopardizing it makes no sense. We're concerned, of course, that the community itself could be further marginalized and decades of gains could be lost. And that would be, in and of itself, a human tragedy. When the law passed, going back to May, President Biden directed the government to evaluate all aspects of our engagement with Uganda, including our foreign assistance, including our investments, including the application of sanctions. That process is ongoing, and when I have any news for you on that front, we will, of course, will share it. When it comes to possible government shutdown, I would just say this. First, we hope it doesn't happen. From the perspective of the State Department, we're very focused on making sure that no matter what happens, we can focus our resources on advancing and protecting the national security, and of course, making sure that we can carry out the functions necessary to do that, to protect human life, property, and security. Our work would clearly be affected by this. It would make it harder to do everything that we do to try to advance national security. So we urge Congress not to take this step. I'm not going to comment on the specifics of possible legislative arrangements. That is up to members of Congress. But I can just say as a general proposition that the shutdown shouldn't happen. But if it does, we will take every possible step to make sure that at the very least, we're carrying out our functions to protect national security.
For the next question, Ariel Moutsatsos with Televisa.
Thank you, Matt. Good morning. I have a question for Secretary Blinken and also for the Minister Alicia Bárcena. Secretary Blinken, Attorney General Garland said recently that there are diplomatic talks with Mexico regarding the extradition of the other three Chapitos, the brothers of Ovidio Guzman. How are those talks going? Has their extradition been formally requested? And what are your expectations regarding a timeline for that, since they are not yet under arrest? And then my question for Foreign Minister Alicia Bárcena in Spanish, if you don't mind. El Departamento de Estado,
The State
Secretaria,
Department,
hizo público
Madam
hace unos
Secretary,
días
made it
que
public a
Estados
few
Unidos
days ago
va a
that the
expandir
U.S. is going
radicalmente
to
sus
radically
operaciones en
expand its
México contra el
operations
fentanilo
in Mexico
y a
against
reestructurar
fentanyl
a su
and
personal,
restructure
incluyendo
its
nuevos
staff,
agentes.
including new
¿Es esto
agents.
algo que México y Estados Unidos
Is this
hablaron
something
y
that the
acordaron
U.S. and Mexico
ya?
talked
Y en
about
su
and agreed
caso, si
upon
ya se
already?
aprobó la
And if
adición de nuevos
so,
agentes y
then
cuántos son.
has
Muchas
adding
gracias. Thank
new
you.
agents been approved, and how many? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. I'm afraid, though, I'm going to disappoint you because I have to refer you to the Department of Justice when it comes to extradition matters.
Sí, bueno, gracias por su pregunta.
Yes, thank you for your question.
En general, los agentes
Generally speaking,
extranjeros de
foreign
seguridad son
security
autorizados
agents
por el grupo
are
de alto
authorized
nivel
by
de
the
seguridad
high-level
que
security
se
group
estableció en la
that
Ley de
was
Seguridad
created
Nacional.
in the National
Son
Security
decisiones
Law. These are
colegiadas que
joint
se toman
decisions
sobre
that
la
are
base del
made
respeto a nuestra
based
soberanía y
on respect
reciprocidad.
for sovereignty and reciprocity.
Estos temas precisamente
These
se
issues
debaten
specifically
en el
are
Gabinete de Seguridad,
discussed in
que es
our
coordinado
security
por
cabinet,
Rosa
coordinated by
Rodríguez,
Rosa
quien
Isela
es la persona
Rodriguez,
indicada
who
para
would
dar una
be the
respuesta
right
específica
person to give you
sobre
a
este tema.
specific answer to your question.
For the next question, Eduard Ribas with FA.
Thank you very much. Secretary Blinken, I would like to ask if in yesterday meetings with the foreign minister from India, you raised concerns about this crisis with Canada, and if you urge India to collaborate with Canada in the investigation of this assassination. Secondly, for Ambassador Tai and Secretaria Buenrostro, did you address the trade dispute over the Mexican corn? When do you expect the issue to be resolved, and when? Y finalmente, si me permite la
And finally,
canciller,
if the
vimos ayer que algunos
Minister of Foreign Affairs will allow me, we saw yesterday that a few Republicans would like to condition funds to Mexico on the fight against fentanyl. Is this a concern for you? Are you worried that in some way cooperation between both countries might become complicated during the campaign? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. As I've said before and other colleagues have said before, we're very concerned about the allegations that have been raised by Canada, by Prime Minister Trudeau. We have been in close contact with Canada about that, and at the same time, we have engaged with the Indian government and urged them to work with Canada on an investigation. And I had the opportunity to do so again in my meeting yesterday with Foreign Minister Shankar. Those responsible need to be held accountable, and we hope that our friends in both Canada and India will work together to resolve this matter. Catherine?
Yes, on the corn issue, Secretary Buenrostro and I had a bilateral yesterday where we covered many issues. We did not cover corn, however, and that's not because it's not important, but it's because we're at the point in our conversations where we've handed the issue over to our lawyers. So in terms of timing, you can take a look at the USMCA procedures. I think it will be a number of months before we expect a response, but there are a clear set of procedures that are set out, and our teams are participating on both sides.
Como lo comenta la secretaria Tai, para resolver una controversia ya hay mecanismos preestablecidos, es un procedimiento, hay plazos determinados, inicia con la instalación de un panel que es el que va a resolver y concluye con la resolución final. En este momento estamos en la conformación del panel y para mediados de marzo más o menos, considerando los tiempos legales, podemos estar teniendo una resolución final. Ahorita es nada más trabajo de los panelistas y de los abogados hasta obtener el resultado
En relación a su pregunta, hemos seguido con mucho cuidado el debate que se está dando en torno a este tema. Sabemos que hay digamos, esto que han dicho algunos republicanos. No creemos que pase finalmente, pero lo que sí nos interesa es que la comunidad de Estados Unidos sepa que México tiene un gran compromiso por apoyar en el combate al tráfico de drogas y fundamentalmente fentanilo. Yo creo que eso es lo que más me interesa transmitir, que estamos muy interesados en colaborar, en cooperar, en hacer todo lo que esté a nuestro alcance para controlar todo lo que es la cadena de valor
to
la cadena
control
productiva,
the
digamos,
productive
ilegal de
chain,
los precursores y
illicit
del fentanilo
productive
mismo.
chain of illicits and fentanyl.
And the final question goes to Jesus Esquivel with Proceso.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Secretario Blinken,
Secretary Blinken,
le voy a hacer la pregunta en
I
español.
will pose my question in Spanish.
México, estados específicos están padeciendo gran violencia,
Certain
donde
Mexican
el gobierno
states are
mexicano
suffering
la minimiza,
great
y me refiero al caso de
violence,
Chiapas,
violence minimized
a
by
de
the
Guerrero
Mexican government.
y Zacatecas,
And I am
respectivamente.
talking about Chiapas,
Hubo asesinatos
Zacatecas,
incluso de
Guerrero.
jóvenes,
Youth
y
have been
el presidente de
murdered,
México ha dicho
and
que
the
simplemente
Mexican
fue un día
president
difícil.
has said
La pregunta que le quiero hacer a usted
it was
es,
a
como va a ser
difficult
la
day.
reunión del diálogo de alto
I
nivel,
am wondering what
si
you can
Estados
tell us
Unidos, como
about the high-level
corresponsable de
dialogue
esta
meeting,
violencia por el alto consumo de
if
fentanilo en
the
Estados Unidos y el
U.S.
tráfico de
with
armas,
its
que
co-shared
aunque aumentó la
responsibility, given the
confiscación,
high levels
no
of
es
fentanyl
suficiente,
consumption here and what has to do
está
with
dispuesto a
the
ofrecer
guns
más
that come
ayuda,
into our
o
country.
si en
Are you
México
willing
van a
to
presentar
provide
ustedes alguna
greater
iniciativa
support?
en
Are you
este
going to
sentido,
introduce
tomando en cuenta
initiatives
el
to
gran
that
nivel de
effect,
violencia que se vive
taking
en el
into
país
account the
y que
high
ustedes
levels of
reconocen a través de las
violence
alertas de la
in
Embajada
the country, and which you
de Estados
recognize
Unidos en
through
México?
the alerts of the
Y la
U.S.
pregunta
Embassy in
para la
Mexico.
secretaria
And my question
Bárcena
for
tiene
Secretary
que ver con migración.
Bárcena has to do with
Organizaciones
migration.
de noticias de Estados Unidos reportaron
News
un nuevo
agencies
acuerdo,
in the U.S. have
el
reported
cual no
a
ha sido
new
aclarado por
agreement,
ninguno de los dos
which has
gobiernos,
not
en el
been
cual señalan
clarified
que entre
by
los
either
puntos acordados
government.
está el que
It is
México va a
said that
hacer
one of the agreed upon
deportaciones
points is
inmediatas
that Mexico
de
will
migrantes a
undertake
terceros países.
immediate
Quisiera que si por favor
deportations
nos
of
aclara
migrants to
este
third
punto
countries.
y
Could you
ojalá no
give
le dé la
us
vuelta y
some
nos diga
clarity
sí o
on this?
no habrá
Could you
deportaciones
say yes
inmediatas.
or no?
Y por último, usted
About
acaba de
whether you will
destacar el
undertake
programa de USAID
immediate
como parte de la
deportations. And then you were
cooperación
talking
México-Estados
about
Unidos. El presidente López
USAID
Obrador siempre lo ha calificado
program. President
como una
López
herramienta de
Obrador has
intervención
always
de Estados
talked
Unidos.
about this as
¿Difiere
a
usted
tool
con el
for
presidente en ese
American
sentido o por qué lo está
intervention.
aplaudiendo?
Do you
Gracias.
see this differently? Why are you celebrating this?
Thank you very much for the question. This is a shared challenge and a shared responsibility for the United States and Mexico. Fentanyl coming into the United States is the #1 killer of Americans aged 18 to 49. So it is for us a national priority. But it's a priority across the entire spectrum of action that we need to take. And that starts with working to reduce demand, working to increase treatment, making sure that people can get help when they need it. And we're making very massive efforts to do that in this country, including with public information campaigns, and including with actions that are taking place at a community level, at a state level, and at a national level. But we also have to be acting across, as I said, the entire spectrum. That includes at our border, that includes with our close partner Mexico, and it includes with countries around the world, because this is a global challenge. Many of the chemical precursors that go into fentanyl are manufactured halfway around the world, then come close to us in Mexico, fabricated into fentanyl, sent across the border. So we also have to deal with that part of the chain. I say all of this because we put together a coalition of countries this summer, more than 100 countries now, with Mexico and the United States playing a very important lead role, to make sure that we're acting cooperatively and collectively against the challenge of synthetic opioids. This is a challenge that is not simply one for the United States or Mexico. We're seeing this spring up around the world. We're seeing Captagon, we're seeing methamphetamines, we're seeing other synthetic opioids that are wreaking havoc in various parts of the world. And fentanyl itself, while we've been the canary in the coal mine in the United States, we're now seeing fentanyl use and distribution go up in various parts of the world as these criminal cartels are trying to make markets elsewhere, because our market, tragically, has become so saturated. But in terms of what the United States and Mexico are doing together, and Alicia talked about the importance that we both attach to this, I think it's very important to note that not only do we have a responsibility on the demand side, we also have a responsibility when it comes to guns that are getting into Mexico and that are helping to fuel the violence that goes along with the cartels that are engaged in the drug enterprise, and violence more broadly We feel a deep sense of responsibility. Last year, we made it, for the first time, a federal crime to be engaged in the trafficking of guns. That's a very important new tool, a new element. We're working in ever closer collaboration to get at the guns before they get into Mexico, and working collaboratively with Mexico law enforcement. At the same time, we're seeing very important collaboration in Mexico with Mexican authorities on dealing with fentanyl, the fabrication, the labs, et cetera, in Mexico. We have dismantled synthetic drug labs. We pursued criminal networks and their finances. We reduced the amount of illicit firearms, cash, and other illicit goods that are crossing our border. And we strongly support Mexico in its efforts to counter production and trafficking. We're providing assistance on seizing and investigating these clandestine drug labs. We're preventing the diversion of chemical precursors. We're increasing information sharing on synthetic drugs and precursors. We're enhancing security at our ports of entry. It's worth noting that of the synthetic opioids, of the fentanyl coming into the United States via Mexico, of the fentanyl that we seized, 95% is coming through legal ports of entry. So the efforts that we're making to strengthen even more our capacity to detect and stop this flow, that's a very important element. So it's a very long way of saying this is a matter of shared responsibility for us, shared obligation, shared concern. But it goes beyond the United States and Mexico. It's a global challenge, a global problem, and our two countries together are now working with, as I said, more than 100 other countries to get at it in new and effective ways.
Quisiera responderle diciéndole en primer lugar que México no minimiza el problema de la violencia en los estados que usted menciona. El presidente lo ha abordado directamente todos los días, de lunes a viernes. Se sostiene una reunión del Gabinete de Seguridad en donde se analiza con cuidado de 6 a 7 de la mañana todos los días cuáles son los problemas que está enfrentando el país, y sobre todo se han analizado y se analizan con cuidado los estados que usted menciona, Zacatecas, Guerrero, Chiapas, desde luego que estamos muy alertas, y el presidente López Obrador personalmente, junto con el secretario de la Defensa, la secretaria de Seguridad y Protección Ciudadana, el secretario de Marina, la secretaria de Gobernación y la Comisión Nacional de Inteligencia, abordando este tema todos los días. Sin duda, el tráfico de armas es uno de los problemas críticos, y efectivamente estamos trabajando con Estados Unidos, y le agradezco tanto que estemos hablando de esto como una responsabilidad compartida, porque en el fondo es así, estamos juntos, somos vecinos, y lo vamos a hacer, pues, la verdad, por muchos años, espero, y esto va a llevarnos a que tenemos que ayudarnos, y las armas que están entrando desde Estados Unidos a México ilegalmente, pues son alrededor de 200,000 armas al año, y eso realmente, pues sí, lo que estamos haciendo, y esto sí es muy importante, es que la Secretaría de Defensa, que ojalá y algún día puedan ustedes conversar directamente con ellos, está haciendo un trazado muy cuidadoso de estas armas y cómo se van yendo a los distintos estados de la República. Esto es una información que con gusto, si usted la necesita, se la podemos compartir. En relación a los retornos asistidos, si me permite cambiar el término, en retornos asistidos, México está llevando adelante retornos asistidos hacia Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, estamos explorando Ecuador, Venezuela y Colombia. Y alrededor ya estamos realizando 6 vuelos semanales en el caso de Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, los países centroamericanos. Y creo que es muy importante que el tono de nuestra conversación sea un tono constructivo y con evidencias en la mano. Muchas gracias.
Thank you all.
Perdón, lo de USAID. A ver, USAID,
right, USAID. USAID really is a U.S. cooperation agency, just as we have a Mexican cooperation agency. What we're doing right now is bringing together our efforts to work together in Central America, and that is working out as long, and what we want is to show results in communities that need it. As Secretary Buenrostro said, the main focus of the high-level dialogues, economic, security, drugs, migration, weapons, the goal is to benefit people.
Thank you all.
Thank you.